Hi there, and welcome back to this second part of the series where we are going to answer the essential question of how to get an access token. We are going to actually start by trying to access the Apple School Business Manager Resource API. And before we can access it, we're going to need to clear Apple School Business Manager border control. Now, we saw earlier that it was possible for us to take a look at the menu of all the things that we could have Apple School or Business Manager do on our behalf. And in this case, to get a list of organization devices enrolled using automated device enrollment. Now, we are going to put together the request and we are going to send it using this client URL command, where we're passing in one argument, which is the URL to the endpoint that we're trying to access. And I know that some of you are looking at this and thinking, well, how does it know who I am and whether or not I'm authorized to access this resource? And you're 100% right. But we are going to try. We're going to send the request to Apple School Business Manager Border Control, and we get a 401 response. And this means that we are not authorized. We need to get a passport. So we are now off to the Apple School or Business Manager Passport Office, which is really just another API for the Apple School or Business Manager OAuth endpoint. Now, they send us back saying you need to complete a passport application form, which will be known as a JSON Web Token. And we quickly realize that we're going to need more information to fill in this application form, and we're going to need a little bit of special ink for our digital signature. So we are now going to access the Apple School or Business Manager portal, and we are going to authenticate ourselves using our username, password, and MFA. We can then go on to create an API account. Now, the account itself will be given a client ID, which is basically a label for our specific API account. We will also be given a public key that is tied to a key ID, again, a label pointing to the public key, and a private key. Now, we're really not sure what this public and private key are at this time, but I will tell you they are just numbers. Now, inside Apple School or Business Manager, we can see that the private key is something we're going to download, and that we can reference the key ID, which is just a universally unique identifier, and the client ID is also just a universally unique identifier prepended with either School API or Business API. So let's go ahead and download our private key and store it securely. Now, we do reference the key ID, the client ID, and some other information to start filling in our passport application form. In fact, it's going to be broken down into two parts, a header and a payload. Let's quickly inspect what that might look like. Now, these are just JSON objects made up of these key value pairs. Now, in the header, it will specify which algorithm we're going to be using. In this case, it is the ES256. This tells us which elliptic curve we're using, which is the P256, and the hashing algorithm, which is going to be the SHA-256 hashing algorithm. We'll talk about those, although very briefly later. We also see reference to our key ID, which is the identifier for our public key. Now, in the payload, we see the audience is just the OAuth URL that we are going to be sending this to. That's the Apple School Business Manager Passport Office. This token does have an expiration date when it was created. The subject and the issuer is just our client ID, and it's really good practice to give this token a universally unique identifier as well, the JTI. All right, so now that we've finished filling in our form, we are going to need to digitally sign it. And to do this, we are going to make use of a function that I'm going to refer to as the signature forge. And its job is to take components, such as our private key, and help us construct our signature. Now, in this case, it is going to generate this output of S, which will, for now, serve as our signature. There will be other ingredients that we're going to put into this signature forge. But what I want you to understand is that we will make sure that our private key is part of the signature. we need to show that we are in possession of that private key. So we sign our passport application form, and this is what it looks like when it is base64 URL encoded. We can clearly identify the header, the payload, and the signature, which are delineated using a period. This is not encrypted. It is just encoded so that we will be able to send it over the wire, sending it to the Apple Scholar Business Manager Passport Office. Now, what we can see in this request is the client assertion, and you can think of that as our passport application form. We are really just asserting our identity. And there we can see again that base64 URL encoded header, payload, and signature. So we have our JSON web token and we send it over the wire. Apple School Business Manager Passport Office will open it up. It can see that our document is made up of a header and payload. That header, remember, has that key ID identifier, so we can go get that public key. It will also take a look at the signature, and in this case, we see that there is this value of S, which is currently our signature. Now, the job is to be able to verify that we did sign our passport application form. So it will use a verification function. And it will also use a list of ingredients. And in this case, it will in part use our signature and the public key. And its job will be to verify our signature. And if it can do so, it will produce our access token. And this is what it looks like. It is, again, just a JSON object. We see that it's made up of key value pairs. And that first key is access token. And the value is the access token. And I'm really not sure how Apple creates this token. So I'm just going to say that it's opaque. But really, if we are in possession of this string, we should get access. We see that the token type is bear, meaning that if we're in possession of this access token, we should have access if it is valid. Notice that this also has an expiration time, and this is 36. So it's good for an hour. These are very short-lived, typically 10-15 minutes, maybe shorter. And we also see the scope of the endpoint that we are trying to access. And in this case, it is business.api. All right. So we have downloaded our access token and it's ready to use. We have our passport. So let's try to access that resource API again. Notice this time I still am using the client URL, passing in that endpoint we're trying to access. We have a backslash, which just means the command is continuing in the next line for ease of making it easy to read. Then we have -h, which indicates we have another argument, which is going to be our header, which is this key value pair where we have the authorization is of bearer, and then we provide in the access token. We are going to then send this request over the wire. Notice that the passport is stapled onto that request, and we get a 200 response, which means we are going to get the resource that we requested. This is that list of those devices that were organizationally owned and entered using automated device enrollment. And so we can see here, this is a JSON formatted object of all the data that we requested. Now, I do hope that one thing resulted from this overview, which are 4 questions. I hope that you asked, like, what is a private key and what is a public key? And the other 2 questions that I hope you came up with is, how is that signature created? I mean, you showed us this signature forge function, but what's it actually doing? And how is it signing that JSON web token? And how is the signature being verified? I mean, we saw a verification function taking some input, but how does it actually work? Now, in our next section, we are actually going to start taking a look at the mathematics of an elliptic curve, and we will actually be able to answer those first 2 questions. So I'm really looking forward to seeing you in the next video.